That's Williams in motion. Low snap. Milroe stopped. Michigan makes a stand and comes up with a milestone playoff victory.
You are Michigan football legends, beloved sons of Michigan, mighty men, and now known simply as national champions.
This is the Winged Helmet Podcast.
We're here, Trent. We made it. We made it to Thursday. Feels good to be back live. It feels good to be back live with somebody. I went, after we got the Jim Harbaugh news yesterday, I went live solo, and it's a lonely place to be when you go live solo. You've got nobody to sort of bounce ideas off of and have conversations with about everything that's going on. And I do think that there's a lot to talk about. And I put out the list earlier on Facebook. We do have a very extensive list of things that we want to cover. Trent, I sent that over to you. I mean, we are trying to be detailed here. There's so much that's happened, I feel like, over the last couple of weeks that there's nothing that we want to forget, nothing we want to leave off. Before we get into the show, though, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping here. So there is a new publishing site. I launched it quietly last week. I didn't really say much about it on the Facebook page, but it is wingedhelmetmedia.com. Wingedhelmetmedia.com. That's where the new articles are going. Trent and I are putting good content on there every single day. You can also go there and see some of the photography that I shot from last season. There's some of the videos that I've done with the player reviews and some of the other things with NIL related type things. And there's going to be more content going on there in the coming days as well. But that's sort of a work in progress. It's something that I built last week. I'm really proud of the way it turned out. I think it's a nice, clean site, and we want to make it an enjoyable experience for you. So that's the new site, wingedhelmetmedia.com. We're also streaming live on the YouTube page as well, Winged Helmet Media on YouTube, so you can go and check us out over there. And of course, to the man sitting next to me, Trent Knoop, welcome to the podcast. This is our first show together. I'm very excited about this. Before we get into the topics, I just want to say a little bit about Trent. So Trent and I officially started working together over the summer. I didn't really know much about Trent, but it's weird because the first time I met Trent was in 2021. We were on the College Game Day set. It was Michigan, Ohio State, and I had the opportunity to go out. It was my first time using like a legit camera, and I had the opportunity to go shoot the game day set. And I think it was my first official year covering the team. And that moment was very surreal because, you had Lee Corso walking by, Kirk Herbstreit's right there, Desmond Howard's. You're within 10 feet of these guys, and you spend so much time seeing them on TV. And I was very, very excited to be there, but I was standing on a podium, and the guy right next to me was none other than Trent Knoop, also down there trying to get content. So that was the first time we met. And then we were fortunate enough to link back up again, working as part of the Wolverine Digest site over the summer. And the thing I'll say about Trent, and the reason why I'm excited that he's here, and the reason why I wanted to bring him along, is because I value people who work hard. I value people who are committed to their craft. I value people who want to get better as time goes on. And Trent really, he possesses all of those qualities. So Trent, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. Opening statement, mission statement, whatever you got. What do you got to say?
Well, it's good to be back. I was here for a couple podcasts last year. I think it was both during the Ohio State week. But funny thing about that 2021 when we met thing was, it was my birthday, and I was working with Isaiah Hull over at Wolverine's Wire, and he was the photographer of the two of us, and I was always up in the booth writing. But he knew it was my birthday, and he sent me down there. And so I get to backstage to take some photos for us, and I see Chris. He's got his camera, and here's me.
Wait, you were using your cell phone as a camera?
I was using my cell phone.
Oh my God, I don't remember that.
How do you?
I don't remember that.
I forgot that.
That's hilarious. The cell phone camera down on the College Game Day set.
Absolutely.
That is.
I was getting some good photos too. I was pretty proud of myself.
You can get a lot with those iPhones lately. But glad to have you on, man. And look, for anybody out there watching, this is going to be a work in progress. Trent and I are going to have to find our groove, and we're committed to doing these shows once a week. Obviously, things will slow down, as the football news sort of slows down in the coming weeks. And God help us all if we ever have to turn to basketball and discuss that, because I don't think anybody here wants to talk Michigan hoops right now. But there is certainly a lot to talk about when it comes to Michigan football. And Trent, I think we just need to dive right into it. And it's the top news of the hour, the top news of the day, the biggest news of the week, really some of the biggest news of the year. Jim Harbaugh officially departing Michigan. The Harbaugh era is over. He accepted the head coaching job with the Los Angeles Chargers. And we were talking about it yesterday. We were texting back and forth, and we knew that something was coming. We knew that there was going to be an announcement one way or another. We weren't sure which way it was going to go. You sent me the text as soon as you saw it come through. I think it was Adam Schefter had put it out. And I'm curious, what were your, because it's been 9 years. It has been a roller coaster ride with Jim Harbaugh leading the way. When you saw that news come through, what were your initial thoughts?
Like, I wasn't shocked. I knew it was coming, but at the same time, it was like, I'm shocked, like he was here for 9 years, and you got to cover. I've been covering the team since 2020, and you've kind of gotten used to Jim Harbaugh and the way he is and the way he acts. And he's been flirting with the NFL for several years now. And he always comes back to Michigan, but it felt like this year was going to be the year that he was going to leave. So like, it wasn't like a real shock, but at the same time, it's like, wow, he finally did it.
Yeah. I feel like it's weird because and I think you hit the nail on the head that in some ways it was expected that it was going to happen, but I was still shocked. Like, I remember when I heard the news, I was upstairs in the bedroom. You had sent me that text. I was running to grab my laptop so I could get the story up. And just like when Michigan won the national championship, it felt like everything kind of felt hazy. It just felt like a dream. Like, it was like, holy shit, it's finally over. Like, in there was a big part of me that even though I thought he might move on, there was almost an equally as big a part of me that was of the belief that he would always stay. That yes, he would go and explore and he would flirt with the NFL, but ultimately he would always return to the University of Michigan. And I think that, a lot of people in the fan base believed that, a lot of this NFL pursuit stuff with Jim Harbaugh was he was trying to leverage things. He was trying to get more out of Ward Manuel, and that Ward Manuel was dropping the ball and not doing enough and not playing ball hard enough to keep Jim Harbaugh. And I'm just not sure. I'm not sure that that's the case. And I mean, I want to talk with you a little bit about that because we've seen that on social media a lot. Ward Manuel, for better or worse, is public enemy number one. People blame him for a lot. They blame him for Bakich. They blame him for John Beilein. Now they're blaming him for Jim Harbaugh. There might be some validity to, the anger that people feel towards Ward Manuel. But in terms of this specific situation as it relates to Jim Harbaugh, how much of a factor do you think was Ward Manuel and the Michigan administration? Or was it just a matter of, look, this was the perfect time, perfect team. Jim was going to leave regardless of what happened at Michigan?
I mean, I think there's a small factor where it was Ward Manuel. You've heard for several years now that there was a rift between Harbaugh and Ward. But at the same time, so when Jim came to Michigan, he was a coach that was known staying in a place for 3, 4, 5 years, and then he would go somewhere else. Well, he was with Michigan for 9 years, and he's an NFL guy. Like, he wanted that Super Bowl. He took the 49ers to Super Bowl against his brother and lost. And that's something I think that haunted him since that loss. And he came to Michigan. He wanted to bring them back to a powerhouse, and he did it.
Yeah.
He beat Ohio State for 3 straight years. He won 3 straight Big Ten titles. He won the national championship. Again, I think that he really wants that Lombardi trophy. And right now, with everything going on, I think he felt like was probably the best time. He's in a good situation. He's got Justin Herbert to coach with the Chargers. I don't think he would have left Michigan for just any job.
Yeah.
It had to be the right situation. And obviously to him, this was the right situation. But I mean, yeah, there's some stuff there with Ward. I fully believe that. But at the same time, I fully believe that he wants to go back to the NFL, and that's why he went.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true. I'll put up the comment though, but Scott Ryan is saying that I'm guessing he's referring to John U. Bacon, said today on the Paul Feinbaum show that no matter what you hear, Ward and Harbaugh hate each other. He also said that he fucked around for 2 years on the contract, which look, maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true, but yeah, that seems to be a prevalent belief that the relationship between Jim Harbaugh and Ward Manuel wasn't all that great, even though the two guys tried to dispel that publicly. It just seemed like there was some sort of a rift there, and a lot of the quote unquote insiders seem to give some credibility to that. What I do think is interesting, and I agree, Trent. I think that Jim Harbaugh was going to go if the right opportunity presented itself, regardless of what Michigan was going to offer. But I do think it's interesting what Angelica, the Detroit News, put out, and John U. Bacon shared it on social media. I put it in an article today. You can go and see it on wingedhelmetmedia.com, but I put it on the Facebook page as well. I think it's interesting to hear from Jim Harbaugh's attorney's perspective how everything sort of went down. And we had been hearing these rumors for a little while, but I'm just going to read it for those of you who didn't read the article today or who didn't see this little blurb from the Detroit News from Angelique. So John U. Bacon retweeted it. It said, Harbaugh's attorneys, who had been trying to work with Michigan to keep him in Ann Arbor, said, however, it took the proverbial 11th hour on Wednesday for Michigan to give in on certain contract language. By then, it was too late. After months of Michigan rejecting contract terms his lawyers proposed in late 2023, a source with knowledge of the negotiations told the Detroit News that Michigan finally agreed to Harbaugh's proposal on Wednesday afternoon when Harbaugh was already in the final stage of discussions with the Chargers. So that, that doesn't necessarily paint Michigan officials in the best light. It certainly doesn't paint Ward Manuel in the best light. It sounds like if you read that, there were things that Harbaugh's camp they were asking for a while and they were not getting. And then on yesterday, Michigan decided that they were willing to meet those needs. But by that time, Harbaugh was already neck deep in his negotiations with the Los Angeles Chargers. And so I think it leaves you feeling like a sense of what if Michigan had committed to Jim Harbaugh, assuming this reporting is correct. What if Michigan had committed to Jim Harbaugh early on, had settled this, before the season even came to an end? Are we able to retain, a guy who I think is generally considered, if not the greatest coach in Michigan football history, he's certainly up there now. I mean, he is definitely one of them, brought a national championship, 15-0 season. That's never been done in Big Ten conference history, back to back outright conference championships. That's never been done in Big Ten history. I mean, he's done a lot here. So when you hear that from the Detroit News, when you hear that report, does that change your mindset at all in terms of like Michigan didn't have any choice in the deal, that he was going to go regardless?
No, I mean, okay, so I'm in the camp of, I think if Harbaugh was going to come back to Michigan, they needed to get a deal done during the season.
Yeah.
I felt like once Harbaugh won the national championship, I'm going back to what I said earlier, where I felt like he's an NFL guy at heart and he wants to win a Super Bowl. Well, he just won his national championship in college. So, hey, if the right opportunity presents itself, the Chargers, let's go get it. Yeah, I mean, maybe if Michigan would have give him everything that he possibly wanted, as soon as the season ended, he would have thought more about it than maybe what he did. I don't know. But I'm still in the camp of, I think Harbaugh wanted to leave and wanted to go chase that dream.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think I'm more in that camp as well. But again, when I hear something like that, when I hear Michigan coming through with, all right, we'll give you everything we want, and they submitted on Wednesday when Harbaugh's out in LA, like I have a problem with that. I remember when they were doing the celebration at Chrysler, and Ward was up on stage and he said, I am doing everything I can to get a contract to this guy. I think most people were thinking, why the hell doesn't he already have it? Why is that work not being done? And maybe what could potentially be coming with the NCAA played a factor in that, because I think Jim Harbaugh maybe wanted some assurances. As far as that goes, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, How much of a role do you think the NCAA played in it, in what could be coming next year? Do you think that was a factor at all in terms of Jim Harbaugh saying, look, I know they're coming after my ass one way or another. They want to get me for something. I'm not going to stick around and deal with it. How much of that was a factor?
I mean, it's got to be a little bit of factor. What is the NCAA going to do to Michigan? Are they going to give Michigan a bowl ban? Are they going to strip them? At the very minimum, I think that they're going to get stripped of scholarships. But yeah, what would have happened to Harbaugh? I'm sure it was definitely a factor that he had to think about. And maybe he knew. I don't know. Like, we don't know what they've been talking to Michigan about, or telling Ward Manuel, or talking to Jim. Like, we have no idea. So yeah, if he wanted that clause put in his contract and Michigan was kind of iffy on it until the final hour, then obviously that had to have played a role.
Yeah, it's just weird. I'm wondering what would change with Michigan to say, okay, we'll give you what you want on Wednesday, if they weren't willing to give it to him early on. It's just, but I think that's part of this. There's not a lot of transparency that goes on, until after the fact, and then people start saying what their experience was, and you kind of have to read the tea leaves and make up your own mind and decisions about what happened. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Jim Harbaugh has moved on. That time is over. And, I saw it yesterday when I hopped on, when the news broke. There were a lot of people, I saw, Michigan man, my ass. And, he left the team high and dry, and is hurting the team with recruiting, hurting the team in the transfer portal. I certainly didn't view his departure that way. Although, honestly, yeah, I got a little bit annoyed year after year having to deal with this. And I said it before, because I felt like Michigan has had some extremely successful seasons over the last 3 years. And instead of taking the next several weeks once the season is over to enjoy it, hit the ground running, get to work, do all the things you would hope to do to capitalize on a good season, much of the discussion was centered around whether or not Jim Harbaugh was going to be back. And so I do think that there's a sense of frustration among the fan base. But overall, when I step back and I take a look at it as a whole, I feel like it was a successful run for Jim Harbaugh. I felt like it didn't come as easily as we all thought it was going to come. He certainly had to deal with his fair share of adversity, but he did what he came back to do. And you said that earlier in the show. He did what he came back to do. He did what we all wanted him to do, which was restore the rivalry with Ohio State, win Big Ten championships, and ultimately win a national championship. And check, check, check. He delivered on all of it. And so for him to leave on this high note, I said it yesterday. I wish him the best of luck. I'm going to be rooting for him. I hope he's able to get the Lombardi Trophy. And in my mind, I guess history will decide, and future critics will decide. But for me and for my money, Jim Harbaugh is the greatest coach that the Michigan Wolverines have ever had. And that's how I will remember him. Forever grateful for the memories that he provided here. And, excited to see what he's able to do with the Chargers, but also really excited to see what happens with the University of Michigan. As far as how you view Harbaugh's legacy, what goes through your mind?
Well, I mean, we all got to remember too, when Harbaugh came in 2015, Michigan was bad. Like, they went through the Rich Rod, then the Brady Hoke had 1 year, but they were coming off of 5-7 season, and Harbaugh took over. It definitely took longer than a lot of us expected for Harbaugh to get to where things finished. Heck, 2020, man, people were wanting him fired. Like, he went 2-4, get him out of town. And then he took the pay cut, fired a bunch of guys, brought in younger guys, and then did what he did the last 3 years. I mean, I agree. To me, he's hands down the best coach that Michigan's had. I mean, the way he was able to develop the culture at Michigan, the way it is right now, in my lifetime, I've never seen it as good as it is right now. It's phenomenal. And, and he's not the best recruiter. He doesn't go out and sign all these 5-star guys, but development. I mean, the development at Michigan, mainly on the offensive line and the defensive line, has been so good. So yeah, I mean, his legacy, man, it's phenomenal.
Is it weird to you that they haven't been able to recruit better on the trail, given how successful the team has been? I mean, 3 straight trips to the college football playoff. They just won a national championship. They're beating Ohio State every single year. They're winning conference championships. Is it a little strange to you that that the results on the recruiting trail really haven't translated into, some of what we see across some of the other elite programs? Is that strange to you, or do you think it's more of a product of, look, Michigan is looking for a specific type of guy now? They, take a guy like Mike Sainristil, who came in as a 3-star, started on the offensive side of the ball, transitioned to the defense. I think he leaves as a Michigan football legend. Has the experience they've had with this group of guys over the last 3 years maybe changed the way they recruit? Or do you think there's still an issue as far as them not bringing in the type of talent they need to sustain the success long term?
Well, going back to what you first said, I think it's very worrisome. Like, you're coming off a national championship and you can't get anybody to commit to you. And, the last couple of years, Michigan's really utilized the transfer portal. Even there, like, they've got 2 guys coming in next year as of right now, assuming, they're going to end up getting some more come springtime. But yeah, I mean, just the recruiting itself is definitely worrisome. But at the end of the day, I don't think it has anything to do with Harbaugh or the coaching staff. It's the NIL. I mean, look at Ohio State, dude. They're offering these kids ungodly amount of money to come play for them. Yeah. Like I think it was Ryan Day who said that he needed $1 million to sign kids in the transfer portal. I've
seen 12 million floated out. I've seen 13 million to retain and bring on guys. Like it's a substantial amount of money that's being reported that the people down in Columbus are forking out to try to, quite frankly, build a roster that can beat the University of Michigan and win a national championship. And I think people at Michigan have made it pretty clear that they're not going to go about things that way. They're not going to pay for recruits. They're not going to offer bags of money to get guys out of the transfer portal. And in some ways, I think, it can be a little bit frustrating. But then when you look at the results on the field, I find it hard to be critical of how they go about their business because they've been so successful. So it's one of those, like, yeah, I feel like if you got to offer like an elite guy out of the portal some money, or an elite recruit some money to get him to buy in, maybe that's something you do. But maybe those are the types of things that can be a cancer to the culture that Michigan has worked so hard to create in Ann Arbor.
Well, I mean, look at, someone just mentioned Texas A&M. Look at them. They had a huge, I think that was actually recruiting from high school. But anyway, they signed the number 1 class. They offered these kids all that money. And what did they do this year? Absolutely nothing. And then half of them transfer out. So yeah, I mean, offering these kids $1 billion, it doesn't mean anything. You have to still develop. And that's something that Jim Harbaugh was excellent at. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, he was excellent at it. He was excellent at putting the right pieces in place in terms of his coaching staff. And I think maybe that's where we transition to now that, Harbaugh is no longer in the picture. What is next for Michigan football in terms of the head coaching position? I put up the comment from Troy Flynn. Troy Flynn, I could not agree more with this statement. And look, Trent and I talked about this a little bit. I think I even brought it up yesterday. I don't know where the Brian Kelly thing started, but I cannot think of a worse person to bring to Ann Arbor than Brian Kelly. And it was weird to me because I was looking on social media today and I saw, Colin Cowherd, he has his podcast, and he was going through all of the reasons why Michigan should make the move and bring in a guy like Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly's not a likable guy, but guess who else wasn't a likable guy? Jim Harbaugh wasn't likable. Well, the big difference is people in Michigan liked Harbaugh. People in Michigan hate Brian Kelly. We do not want him here. And then, I think the basis of his statement was that Michigan is going to do the easy thing by promoting Sharon Moore and making him head coach. And that doing the easy thing typically doesn't lead to good results when you promote from within. And, to a certain extent, I see the point he's making, that when you move on from one elite coach, the ideal scenario is that there would be another elite coach somewhere out there waiting to take over. But I don't, that's obviously not the case right now as far as outside of Michigan. But as it relates to Sharon Moore specifically, I just have a hard time buying into this idea that anybody else should have an opportunity to coach this football team than the guy who helped lead them to the most difficult wins of the season. He stepped in when the team needed him most. He's a hell of a recruiter. He can clearly develop an offensive line. His players absolutely love him. You saw Zach Zinner come out last night and said, no interviews even necessary. It's Papa Moore's time. And I think that's the general consensus on this football team, is that these players love Sharon Moore. They love playing for him. And yeah, Sharon Moore has not been a head coach yet, but he had a front row seat to watching Jim Harbaugh build a national championship team and all of the things that it takes to be able to do that. And so for all those reasons and more, I can't see a scenario where Michigan goes anywhere else other than Sharon Moore. Are you in the same camp? Do you think that's the way that this is going to head and should head?
Well, before we go there, we had a discussion last night about outside sources or candidates, and I did discover that Chris is actually a big Brian Kelly fan. He just doesn't want to let you guys know that, but he's
a closet Brian Kelly fan.
Yeah, he's definitely on the Kelly train.
That's why I don't want him here, because I love him too much. I care too much.
No, like Sharon Moore probably isn't the fancy name that Michigan's probably used to trying to go and get. Like they went out and got Jim Harbaugh, you know.
Yeah.
Rich Rodriguez was a big name at that point in time that they brought him in.
Yeah, he was.
But it's got to be Sharon Moore. Look what he did. Like he finished the season with wins against Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State. Buckeye fans, like they're clapping that Harbaugh is gone, but like you literally just lost. You lost to Sharon Moore. He coached the team and won. And the other thing is, I think CJ said it earlier, you don't have time for this big nationwide search. Like you need to start recruiting your players right now. And Sharon Moore is loved. He's part of the culture that Harbaugh built. Like it's gotta be him.
I agree. It's got to be Sharon Moore. Robert Jr. Green. We better keep Jesse Minter. This is one that I don't think is going to happen. I have a hard time believing that Jesse Minter is going to remain on staff. I think, that it's being reported that, part of what Jim Harbaugh wants to take along with him is Jesse Minter and Jay Harbaugh, obviously. And then today I saw somebody bring up Ben Herbert, and I will say this. Listen, I don't care if Michigan has to pay Ben Herbert $50 million a year to stay in Ann Arbor. I know Ben Herbert gets a lot of credit for the impact that he had on this football team, the way he developed them physically, the way he developed them mentally. Jim Harbaugh was obviously a big fan of who he was and what he meant to the team. I think Ben Herbert, for as much praise as he gets in Ann Arbor, doesn't get enough. To me, you make Sharon Moore the head coach, and then you do everything you can within your power, financially, within the contract, incentives, whatever you can do to keep Ben Herbert in that building. Because as far as I'm concerned, he's the heartbeat of this team. He's the soul of this team. He is the guy that gets these guys ready in the offseason, gets their bodies ready, gets their minds ready. He's that presence on the sideline. Like you can see him every time you look at him. I don't care if he's in Schembechler Hall. I don't care if he's walking on the sideline. The dude looks like he's ready to rip somebody's head off. He is constantly just switched on and in that mode. And I think he is a big, big reason why the Michigan Wolverines went from punching bag every single year to the Buckeyes to now the Wolverines are the Big Ten bully. They're the ones pushing people around. They're the ones shoving their way through the conference. They're the ones winning championships. You go into Alabama, you bully Alabama. Now, I know it was a tough team, but I was down on the field. I saw what Alabama had in terms of talent. They had, I forget what the dude's name is. I think he's going to go in the first round. He's one of their offensive linemen. Number 65. Can't remember his last name. Dude was one of the most well put together human beings I've ever seen. I said this on one of our previous shows, but he was doing his offensive line drills, and I was standing maybe like 5 feet away. And as he was stomping on the ground, I could feel it in the grass. Like he was moving the earth. Like Alabama had athletes that Michigan just doesn't bring in. That's right. J.C. Latham. That's who it was. Michigan doesn't have anybody like that on their roster, but the Wolverines went into the Rose Bowl, handled their business. And if you watch, I think it was Josiah Stewart on the last play blew up J.C. Latham to get into the background, or Latham to get into the background for that game-winning stop. And so this team is physically tough. They're mentally tough. And I think Ben Herbert is a big part of that. And I think you have to keep this guy on your staff, no matter what happens moving forward. To me, it's Sharon Moore, it's Ben Herbert, and then, Mike Elston, you do what you can do to keep him around. You had mentioned Steve Klinkscale, promoting him, putting him in a bigger role. Like, how do you see the staff around Sharon Moore evolving?
Well, I agree with you about Ben Herbert. I forget who put it on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. But
can I say it's always going to be Twitter?
I agree. I always say Twitter.
Call it X. Like, even when we're writing an article and I'm like, so and so said on X, I'm like, no, delete Twitter. I can't call it X. I know it's X, but it's always going to be Twitter. Never mind. That's a discussion for another day. But I hate that fucking name.
Anyway, Herbert, I don't know what his contract looks like for Michigan, but I read that someone put that he's actually one of the highest paid strength and conditioning coaches in college football.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the Chargers wouldn't pay him nearly the amount that what Michigan pays him. So unless he has some big loyalty to Jim Harbaugh where he's got to go with him, I don't foresee him leaving Michigan, which is absolutely major. Like, it's huge for the program at Michigan. But anyway, yeah, if I'm Michigan, I'm going to keep everything internal. I imagine, like, of course, you're going to promote Sharon Moore to head coach. I imagine he's going to have a big say in the play calling next year as well. And
how do you feel about this? We've got CJ coming in with, do you make Kurt Campbell OC? Do you make that?
I was going to say Mike Hart is what I was going to say, because I think
do you think Mike Hart's going to stick around? Do you think he's going to be here for the 2024 season?
Well, I think that's how you keep Mike Hart around, because I think he wants an offensive coordinator job. I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job next season. So if you make him OC, he's got to stay at Michigan. I mean, he's getting a promotion. He's going to get a pay raise. He's going to get more responsibility. And then I would assume Kurt Campbell would stick around as a quarterback coach, but either way, you could lose one of them if you don't promote one of them to OC. And then on defense, again, keep it internal, promote Klinkscale and Elston, do like some co-DC there where they're both happy. If you go and bring somebody in that's not from Michigan, well, you might make them mad and they might leave because they feel like they should have that. They've been around the program, especially Klinkscale. He's been around since 2021, and that secondary has been great under him. So I think that he definitely deserves at least a chance to.
Yep. Maybe you go the direction that Travis says. You just make Shoelace offensive coordinator. I mean, if he can call plays the way that he could, he could
eligibility.
Can we get him back? Yes. Does he have any eligibility left? I would certainly love to, to be able to bring Shoelace back into the fold. That's a conversation we're going to get into, because I think that that's going to be something that, now that we're looking ahead and, it kind of seems like we know who the head coach is going to be and maybe what this staff is going to look like. But I think a big question is, what is this roster going to look like? Because you lose, 20 guys to the NFL draft, and you're talking about, Zach Zinner, Trevor Keegan, Blake Corum, JJ McCarthy, Roman Wilson, Mike Sainristil. I can go on and on and on about Chris Jenkins. These guys that were an incredible part of a critical part of Michigan's success. And you look forward to 2024 and you wonder, does Michigan bring back enough to be able to succeed and to win at the highest level again with what they have? We don't know what they're going to end up doing in the transfer portal, and we'll find that out, as things get settled at the head coaching position. But I am curious, let's look ahead to 2024 a little bit. Focus on the offense. I'm not sure if there's a specific group you want to start with. You would put out actually an article about what your prediction was going to be for the depth chart offensively. And so maybe that's a good place to start, because it seems like that's where Michigan's losing most of their key. Your entire offensive line gone, your starting quarterback gone, RB1 gone, top receivers gone. So offensively for this team in 2024, what is the outlook for Michigan?
Offensively, you said we're talking first?
Yeah. Let's go offense first.
Well, obviously the big question mark is going to be quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the most intriguing option is probably Alex Orji, and that's who I put in my piece that I wrote. That's probably going to start as of right now next season. The problem is he's thrown one career pass at the college level. Like, yeah, the dude's athletic. Obviously, he's built like a linebacker. He could run the ball. Like we've seen that. We have seen him throw one pass in college football. Like,
why do you
he's a
think
quarter-
that was, by the way? I mean, they came in, they had a special package for him, which was take the snap and run with it and serve as a wrecking ball. Why do you think it was that we never got to see Alex Orji throw a single pass anytime he came in?
I don't know. That's something that I've pondered on myself. Like, you hear the coaching staff saying, yeah, man, he's got a cannon. He can throw the ball. He's as talented as anybody, but
will be the greatest kick returner in the history of college football. We didn't get to see that either.
And he threw one pass in 2 seasons at Michigan.
Yeah,
he's a quarterback. Like, we know that he can actually throw the ball, but we haven't seen it in a game setting. So that's a little worrisome, right? Like, you're going in next season with him potentially being your number one option, and Texas is on the schedule week 2. Like, is he going to be able to go in there and?
Well, they got to come. They got to come here. They got to come here. But yes, go on to the field and get the job done. And I mean, who are so the other option? So we got Alex Orji as an option. We've got potentially Jack Tuttle, who's applying for his 17th year of eligibility. We'll see if he gets approved there. You got Davis Warren coming back. You've got the true freshman Jaden Davis coming back. And you and I talked about this a little bit. Even if you go with Orji as QB1, it almost feels like you kind of want to see Michigan utilize Jaden Davis in his freshman year the way that Michigan utilized J.J. McCarthy in his freshman year, right? Give him some run, let him go out there and make some plays, find his sea legs, and prepare him for year 2. Is that where you're at?
That's 100% where I'm at. I personally want to see a 2-quarterback system and put Orji out. Let's see what he can do. Let's see him throw the football. And then, Jaden Davis, man, at one point in time, he was one of the top quarterbacks in this cycle. He was a 5-star recruit. And for whatever reason, he kept dipping in the recruiting ranks. But I mean, he was named Mr. Football in North Carolina. The dude is legit. J.J. McCarthy even said like how good he was. And he was a 5-star recruit. Like, he's talented. So at one point in time. So, I want to see what he can do. I want to see him and Alex Orji both compete for it. And then maybe by week 3 or 4, you can actually settle on somebody. But because obviously you don't want to throw 2024 down the drain by just starting a freshman that's not ready. Jaden Denegal too. We talked about him last night, and he's 6'5". He has a great frame. He's got a cannon. Like, I've watched him warm up in the press box, and that dude has a cannon.
Yeah, I mean, he looks the part, but again, I think he threw, he's thrown 4 or 5 career attempts. He was 4 or 5, in those attempts, and so efficient, but not in, not when the game was on the line. And so I think that's the point, is that even for as much as you might be in the camp of it's got to be Alex Orji, like every single guy, including Jack Tuttle, is largely unproven at this point. Like, they haven't really had to be that guy. And I think that's a little bit of a concern, especially when you move on from it. Look, you're never going to replace a JJ McCarthy. And Jim Harbaugh talked about this, that not only was he, a once in a generation type quarterback, but he said once in a lifetime. They come around once in a lifetime, said that JJ McCarthy was the greatest quarterback to ever play at the University of Michigan. And again, I think we can all be a prisoner of the moment and sort of get caught up in those things. But when you look back at all of the quarterbacks that Michigan has had, to me, there wasn't anybody who could do the things that J.J. McCarthy could do. And it started in his freshman year. That pass he made to Dalen Baldwin against Western Michigan, that sort of set the tone. That sparked it in my mind that, yeah, this dude is different. Like, we have not seen a Michigan quarterback be able to do that. And he continued to make plays like that throughout his career. When we were talking yesterday, I brought up the play he made in the Rose Bowl, where it was the toss back from Donovan Edwards, where JJ had to go up, snag it with one hand, come down, compose himself, toss it 30 yards on a dime with pressure in his face, hits Roman Wilson. He was a gamer in every sense of the word. And that was what was so special about him, is he would do whatever it took to get the job done. If that meant he had to throw it 40 times, he would do it. If it meant he had to turn around and hand the ball off 32 times straight, like he did against Penn State, he would do that as well. And so extremely hard to replace a guy like that. But I agree, man. I almost feel like my gut tells me that I hate the 2 quarterback system because it really tells me that like you don't have that solidified QB1. But if it means that Jaden Davis is who we hope he is, and you can get him up to speed, and Alex Orji is who we hope he is, I think that 2 QB combo can be pretty deadly and present some different problems for an opposing defense. So if I were to go with one guy right now, my money's on Alex Orji, but I think it's going to be, can he be consistent with the ball? Can he get a good grasp of the offense? Does he have ball security? Like those are all things that may have contributed to why they weren't ready, letting him sling it around when he was in the game. But we all know that he can run the ball. He can put his shoulder down and he runs like a fullback. And so, he's got the build of a linebacker. He's got a big arm. And if he can take command of this offense, I think that he can certainly be Michigan's QB1. But I agree, man. I want to see a little bit of Jaden Davis during his freshman season, not just in garbage time either. I want to see him come out and get some legitimate reps and see what he's made of. He's an early enrollee. He was there for the the Rose Bowl prep and the national championship prep. So he's already kind of getting acclimated to Ann Arbor. It would be nice to see what they do there. But I mean, Trent, you got to have somebody to protect the quarterback. And up front on the offensive line, Michigan lost everybody. So they're
Miles Hinton.
Everybody but Miles Hinton, right? And even Miles Hinton was sort of interchangeable because he went through an injury and, he had earned the starting role and, he was kind of in and out there. So let's talk about that offensive line a little bit and how you see that playing out. You would put out the depth chart for Michigan's offensive line, what you think it's going to look like. I have it here in front of me.
Okay.
As far as the starters, you don't have it in front of you, do you?
Not yet.
Okay, I got it right here. So the starters that you have for next year are 5th-year senior Miles Hinton. Then you got redshirt junior Giovanni El-Hadi. You got redshirt junior Greg Crippen at the center position. And then you got graduate student Josh Preview, who came over from Northwestern, was a captain with Northwestern. So they were able to snag a pretty good prospect out of the portal there in Preby. And then you've got Andrew Gentry on the other side. But when we talked about this a little bit, your concern wasn't necessarily with the starting group, because that sounds like a starting group. Those are some big boys up front. They played some football. I think they'll be just fine. The concern might be who's behind them. Do they have the type of depth on the offensive line that they're going to need if a Zach Zinner goes down, if a Miles Hinton goes down, if a Carson Barnhart goes down? Do you have guys that can replace them? What's your thought about Michigan's offensive line heading into 2024?
Yeah, kind of like you and I talked last night. Like, I think the 5 starters that they agree on are going to be legit. Like, I think they're going to be really good. They've all been in the system for several years now. I mean, Miles Hinton's new, but he was with them last year and played a lot. So I think the starting 5 is going to be good, but exactly like what happens if Zach Zinner goes down, or just anybody goes down. You're talking about the backups next season were 3rd stringers this year. And yeah, I mean, most of them have been with the program for a few years. Like on my depth chart, I've got like Tristan Bounds. He's a junior.
Yeah.
Raheem Anderson. He's a junior. There's a few guys that have been with the program that I have as backups, but again,
Jeffrey Percy, who is a massive human being, is he going to get some run this year?
Yeah, Percy's another one. So, I mean, yeah, they've all been with the program, but there's a reason why they've been 2nd, 3rd, 4th string offensive linemen. Is it because Michigan's offensive line was that good? Like, obviously they were that good, but at the same time, again, they were 3rd string guys for a reason. So now you're asking them to come in and play in the toughest schedule in all of college football next year if somebody gets hurt. So yeah, that's probably, to me, outside of the quarterback, that's my biggest worry on offense is the depth of the offensive line.
Yeah, so starters we feel pretty good about, but if somebody goes down, who's going to be that guy to replace them? That's a question mark there. Obviously, there's some question marks at the quarterback position. When you get into the tight end position, I think Colston Loveland leading the way. You're getting an elite tight end back there. You got Marlon Klein, you got Brady Prescorn. You got some guys that are coming in that I think can be serviceable at the tight end position, certainly be helpful to the quarterback and the running game. And let's not forget the rushing attack. You get the Donovan Edwards coming back. That is a huge, huge piece of news for the University of Michigan. But you also got Khalil Mullings. You also got Benjamin Hall. You've got Cole Cabana. You got a number of guys that can do some damage out of the backfield. And so I think the right pieces are in place. Talk about the wide receiver position, Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris, who made some big plays. You got Carmelo English. What Michigan seems to be missing at the wide receiver position is that big-bodied wide receiver, that Cornelius Johnson type guy. And this is something you and I had talked about, Trent, that, you lose Amarion Walker to the transfer portal. Now he's at Ole Miss. You lose Darius Clemens to the transfer portal. Now he's at, where is he? Oregon State. So those are two guys who could have presumably filled those roles who have now moved on. And it feels like, I think with who they've got, they can make it work because Michigan really isn't a pass-heavy offense. And based on how they run things, unless things change dramatically under Sharon Moore, which I don't think they will, I think they can make the pieces they have now work. But you would like to see that big-body guy where you can do a three-step drop back of the corner end zone and the guy can go up, high point the ball, and snag it. And it doesn't seem like Michigan quite has that yet. And so, I mean, maybe that, you're going to have to go into the portal and you're going to have to search around because I don't think it's on the roster and I don't think they have it coming in with the freshman class at this point.
Michigan has a ton of gadget type receivers, a bunch of those 5'9", 5'10", 5'11" guys who you get them in open space and they're gone. But
Wait,
yeah, exactly.
Is that almost a Speed in Space reference that I heard there? Is that all coming to fruition finally? I think
it's starting to come around, yeah. After
finally
20 years, but yeah, they're missing. That's, and myself along with everybody. I think we all thought that Darius Clemens would be that dude this year.
Yeah,
and then he's gone. He's at Oregon State. He came in with so much hype. We all thought that he was going to be that outside guy that Michigan really hasn't had. And some time, probably since Nico Collins, and we really didn't even get to see him for his full potential. He left a year early, but anyway, yeah, I think that once the transfer portal opens in spring, that's got to be something that Michigan hits hard on, finding that 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" guy and bring him in.
Yeah, and Eric Miller, yeah, it seems like Michigan is in a great position to get Gatlin Bair now. I think he's got 2 crystal balls in for Michigan on 247. It seems like it's going to be Michigan, but I don't know if I want to call it a problem because I don't want to be disrespectful, but you're not going to get him for 2 years. So he's going to go on a 2-year mission. It's going to be a minute before you're able to enjoy all the talent that is Gatlin Bair. And so, yeah, still in the fold. Looks like Michigan's going to get him, but you're going to have to wait for a while before you see him in the winged helmet, unless something dramatic changes. And I'm not sure that when you make that kind of commitment that you move away from that sort of commitment. So it'll be a while before we see him in Ann Arbor. But generally speaking, yeah, sure, there's some questions about this Michigan offense, but I also think you can look at it and be doom and gloom and they're going to have to replace a lot. How are they going to do it? Or you can look and say, there are some good weapons left here. There is a lot to work with. And the good news is when you have an offensive line that's a little inexperienced and needs to be developed, who else would you rather have other than Sharon Moore leading the way and teaching these guys? And so I think Michigan's in a pretty good spot offensively, but they do have some needs they need to address. On the flip side, Trent, when we look at the Michigan defense, I feel about as confident as this defense in 2024 as I felt about them in 2023. I feel like Kenneth Grant is on the verge of exploding into becoming a superstar. I feel like Mason Graham is pretty much already there. I feel like who they have at the linebacker positions with Hausman coming back, you got the transfer coming in from Maryland, you got edge rushers Josiah Stewart, second on the team in sacks last season. You got Derek Moore coming back, and then in the secondary, you're essentially loaded. You got Will Johnson, you got Makari Page, you got Keon Sabb, you got Rod Moore coming back. You have all of the pieces really that you need to have a top 10, top 5 defense nationally. Now, the one cornerback position, once again, is going to be a question for Michigan, who's going to replace Josh Wallace. But I think they've got some young guys on the roster who are ready to step into that role and certainly compete for a starting job in the fall. But in terms of how you view this defense, confidence level going into 2024, where's it at?
Assuming Michigan doesn't lose any key players due to Harbaugh and potentially Jesse Minter leaving, a 10. I mean, this should be the heart and soul of the team once again, is the defensive unit. I mean, like you kind of went down everything, but Derek Moore, Josiah Stewart, a great tandem at edge. Defensive line, yeah, you got arguably the best duo in all of football with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And then even Rashawn Benny spelling him, like he's a heck of a number 3 linebacker secondary. I mean, it's all so good.
Yeah.
The biggest concern is going to be that cornerback spot, which I kind of have in my depth chart that I think Michigan's going to deploy a 3 safety look. I'm putting Keon Sabb kind of in that corner nickel spot. And then I've got DJ Waller taking the other spot, but Jair Hill, Jaden McBurrows, like we've seen them come in and play well. So, I mean, Michigan's got plenty of talent, and I think the defense is going to be loaded.
I think so too, man. I think this defense, and just as they were in 2023, like they relied on the Michigan defense to really get the job done and to clamp down on the offense, to give the offense a chance to run the type of offense they wanted to run. Michigan never really felt like they had to play out of character all season long, like we saw against TCU in the college football playoff the previous season, where Michigan did have to play out of character because offensively TCU was chunk play after chunk play. Michigan was making mistakes, of course, but TCU was capitalizing, and you never want to see Michigan in a game where it's you're having to score into the 40s and get into the 50s to secure a win. And I think Michigan's defense was a large reason why the offense was able to operate as is. And it feels like that's going to take a lot of the pressure off of the offense this upcoming season as they try to figure things out. Now, the only downside is, Trent, you don't have 4 weeks of essentially preseason football to figure it out, because week 2, you got the Texas Longhorns coming into Ann Arbor, and that is going to be a big time matchup. And before we get into schedule changes in the Big Ten, changes in the college football playoff, all that stuff, we're creeping up on 51 minutes here. I want to ask, I'm just going to put it to you like this. We don't know what Michigan is going to do in the transfer portal. We don't know who's ultimately going to sign on National Signing Day. But this team as is, this roster as is, do you think it's good enough to win a 4th straight Big Ten championship?
Yes, I think it's got the talent to do so. I don't think you're going to see another undefeated season, though, with the schedule that Michigan has in front of it. The Big Ten is going to be so challenging now. It's hard for me to believe that anybody is going to just go through the schedule and win every game. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think going back to the defense, man, like they are absolutely loaded. Once again, assuming that nobody leaves, which I've been seeing reports from like on Texas boards and crap that they're trying to poach Kenneth Grant and offer him all this money and all that stuff.
KG ain't going nowhere. Come on.
Of course,
KG and Mason Graham, they're attached at the hip. They ain't going nowhere.
So that's obviously a concern with Harbaugh leaving. You got all this NIL crap going on, that you have teams like Texas or Alabama, whoever, trying to poach players. But assuming Michigan keeps their main core intact, it's going to be loaded. So as long as you can get good enough quarterback play to score enough points, I mean, I definitely think they could win another Big Ten championship. And also, fans are always like, hey, we need to throw the ball more. Well, this is probably going to be a year where you're going to really, really see Michigan running the football with Donovan Edwards and Mullings and Jordan Marshall and whoever else, Ben Hall. They have good running backs.
And I'm real excited to see what Donovan Edwards does in the RB1 role, because, you talk about a guy who had to pay his dues, came in as a highly rated recruit. I mean, he had every intention of going to the NFL after this season. He said it last offseason. He said, I am going to the NFL. And then obviously the season didn't play out the way we all thought in terms of statistics. But when you talk about a guy who is extremely humble, a guy who is willing to play his role and play it to the best of his ability. And not like he was just a role player. When Michigan needed him most, if you go back to Columbus in 2022, if you look at what he did in the national championship game, he got that party started early. Donovan Edwards is that home run threat type guy that can change the game. You can win by relying on a guy like Donovan Edwards. And look, make no mistake, Blake Corum was unquestionably running back one during his time in Ann Arbor. He earned it. He deserved it. He is that dude, the greatest running back in the history of Michigan football. There's no question in my mind that that's Blake Corum. Donovan Edwards, though, I think has the opportunity to do something extremely special in 2024. And I can't wait to see, man. I'm excited for him to have the opportunity. Hopefully he's able to stay healthy through the season and have the type of year that I think we all expected Donovan Edwards to have last year. And when you're talking about the schedule a little bit, I pulled it up and I'm going through it week by week, and it is going to look a little bit different in the Big Ten next year. We know that we're welcoming in 4 teams from the Pac-12, right? You've got USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon, right? So the gauntlet of getting through the Big Ten is going to be much, much more difficult. I'm just going to run through Michigan's schedule with you really quick, run down the line. Opening week, they got Fresno State at home. Then week 2, you welcome the Texas Longhorns to Ann Arbor. Then you got Arkansas State for homecoming. Then you got USC at home, Minnesota at home, on the road at Washington, who you just played in the national championship, at Illinois, Michigan State, Oregon and Ann Arbor, at Indiana, Northwestern, and then you close out the season at Ohio State. And so when you look at this 2024 schedule, there's not going to be any more of that, Michigan doesn't play anybody, it's a cupcake schedule. This is a gauntlet now. And when you factor in that the Big Ten is getting rid of divisions, so now it's not the Big Ten East, Big Ten West, you take the best team from each division. It is who has the 2 top records in the conference. Those are the 2 teams that are going to be competing for a conference championship. It's entirely likely that we could see back-to-back weeks of Michigan versus Ohio State. But, those 2 teams that have really sort of been the class of the Big Ten Conference as of late, they're going to have to deal with teams like Oregon. They're going to have to deal with USC. They're going to have to deal with Washington. And it's not going to be as easy as it was this year to get to that spot. And so when you hear that schedule and you look at everybody on there, what are your initial thoughts? Does it strike fear into you, or are you excited about the changes coming to the Big Ten?
Well, I'm definitely excited, and my mindset has kind of changed a little bit from when it was initially released. Like, dude, you're thinking like USC, Washington, which Washington, like, obviously they just made the national championship, but dude, think about how much they lost. Like, their coach left. Their receivers, Michael Penix, is gone.
Sounding familiar. Like, I feel like we're experiencing sort of the same thing.
Yeah.
Their coach left. They lost their quarterback. They've lost some receivers. Right? It's hitting a little close to home, but your point is well taken.
And then, USC, they're probably going to be once again ranked in the top 5 preseason because they're USC, and they're probably going to go and win 4 or 5 games like they have been. Which I'll probably end up eating my words there, but to me on the schedule, the toughest games are obviously going to be Texas week 2. Like, you got Quinn Ewers coming back, and that whole team's loaded. At Oregon is going to be extremely hard, and then of course Ohio State. So, not that Michigan's going to easily win all the rest of those games, but it definitely doesn't strike fear into me like it did originally when I saw the schedule.
Well, they got Oregon at home November 2nd, so they don't got to go out to Eugene. Yeah, it's a home game against Oregon, so obviously that'll be, extremely advantageous. You don't want to go out and play Oregon on the road. That's one of the toughest places to win a football game. But even at home, I mean, it's a gauntlet this year. And then when you consider everything that Michigan is replacing, it's just going to be, interesting to see how this plays out. For as much as I love Michigan, I don't see a scenario where I don't think any team escapes the Big Ten undefeated this year.
Nope.
I think you're going to have a couple teams in the Big Ten championship game with a loss. And then, of course, one of the biggest changes coming to college football is the expansion of the playoff. Now you go from 4 to 12 teams. It kind of feels like Michigan will be in the mix, certainly in the playoff hunt. Tell me, what is your thought on that? Because I thought it was pretty special that Michigan was routinely one of the top 4, had the opportunity to play. Now that we're going to 12, is that a change that you like, that you thought was necessary? Do you think it's a good thing for college football, or are we still going to see, teams 13 and 14, arguing and making their case that they should have been in? Like, what do you think about expansion?
I mean, as a college football fan that I am, I love it. I mean, you're getting more college football. The playoff games, recently they've been better than what they were when it originally started. It seemed like the semifinals were blowouts, and then the finals was a good game. But no, just for me, the fact of more good college football, like, I'm stoked about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Just like this year, teams 5, 6 are going to always try to state their case. We won't get into Florida State, but same with the 12 team. You're going to have that 13, 14, 15. Well, we should be in. I mean, it doesn't matter what number you go to. You could do the top 40 teams, and you're going to have 41, 42 trying to state their case why they should be in the playoff.
Yeah.
Overall, I absolutely love it. I think Michigan should, year in and year out, be in that top 12, especially if they keep everything, the culture, as long as the culture stays where it is right now. Like, I think Michigan should definitely be in a top 12 every single year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I remember there were days when I would hear like culture this, culture that, and I was like, culture bullshit. Like, you need 5-star guys, you need elite players. And I think over the last 3 years, like, yeah, you certainly want top talent, but you also want guys that are a right fit for your program. You want guys that are bought in. You want guys that want to be leaders and want to get better. And I think Michigan has done a really good job of identifying those guys. And I think a lot of those guys are still in the building. And so, dude, I'm excited, man. There are no shortage of changes. The Big Ten is changing. The college football playoff is changing. What we're doing is changing. Jim Harbaugh is off. He's coaching somewhere else. Like, 2024 is going to look incredibly different. And I've said this to you a number of times, Trent. I can't wait to see what things look like when Michigan kicks off in 2024 officially, just kind of where everything is at, where we're at, what's happening. But either way, I'm excited for it. I've seen a couple people bring it up here in the comments. I'm just going to address it really quickly. No, Brandon is not part of the show anymore. No, Brandon is not part of the Winged Helmet anymore. That was a decision that I made back in September of last year to sort of move on and do my own thing after this year. And then after the national championship game, made that official. And there's a lot of reasons for that I don't think are appropriate to go into publicly. All I will say is that I am highly motivated to get as much out of this experience as I possibly can. And in doing so, I want to work with people who share that same mindset. And I certainly think Trent is one of those guys, which is why I'm super excited to partner up with him and see where this thing goes, man, because I think the Winged Helmet is a special community. I was looking at the analytics earlier today, but I sent them over to Trent. Like, the numbers are doing okay. Like, we're doing fine here. I think we're going to find a way to make it work. But yeah, for those asking, that partnership is over, and we'll just leave it at that. And so, Trent, look, our first show under our belt, we went for 1 hour and 3 minutes. We were on time. We were on point. I think we addressed a lot of critical topics. And I'll just leave you with this, Trent. I'll leave you with this, because I was looking at the numbers, looking at some of the accolades when we, go back to where we started, where we talked about Jim Harbaugh. 2021 AP Coach of the Year. 89 and 25 all-time at the University of Michigan. 4th most wins all-time, only trailing Lloyd Carr, Fielding Yost, and Bo Schembechler. 40 and 3 over the last 3 seasons. Back-to-back undefeated seasons. The only coach in Big Ten history to win 3 straight outright conference championships. First coach in Big Ten history to go 15-0. First and only coach to pull that off. And then he ends it all with winning a national championship and heading back to the NFL, man. So what an incredible ride. Jim Harbaugh, we thank you. Trent Knoop, I thank you. I thank you for joining the show. I thought this was fun, man. I didn't get a little too tipsy on the man Mosa. I felt like we stayed on track. I felt like we had some good dialogue. I swear, as we keep it going, I will try to get more of the comments involved. I'm sort of, when you're on this side of it, you're looking at a lot of boxes, and you're trying not to screw up. You're trying not to trip over your words. But for a first show, I think we kicked ass, man. And I'm looking forward to doing it again next week. Yeah, appreciate you all for tuning in.
It was a good time. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
It was a good time. Yes, sir. It was a good time. All right. We'll talk to you next week, Thursday, 7 p.m.